Time to smash it up on a Monday night next to the managing editor of Warchant.com, Irish O'Fell. My name is Tom Lang, and this is the final Monday smash of the month of June. We are getting so close, Ira, to the big times. In fact, we'll have next week off for July 4th, the holiday. So by the time we come back, ACC kickoff's going to be right around the corner. How are you, good sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Yeah, I think the next one we'll do will be July 10th, right?
That's
Because
right.
we'll skip the third, and looking forward to announcing a new friend of the program, a new sponsor for the Monday Smash. We're excited to have them on board, and we'll announce that on the 10th as well.
West in the Villages checking in already. Evan, how are you guys doing out there? This will be another, as Ira's enjoying Pennsylvania's finest beer right there, I think.
It is.
Yeah, there you go. A little Yingling action. This will be in the back half of tonight's show. Questions from you guys. This is the time of year where if you've got big picture questions for Florida State football as we get into the fall, some recruiting questions, we can answer those. Ira was on the ground yesterday outside of Doak Campbell Stadium and College Town, all over the lot by campus, as Florida State hosted 14 official visitors. So he got a firsthand picture of all the things that FSU was doing and all the kids' reactions to their official visits to Tallahassee. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. If you don't mind, hit the like button underneath this video and subscribe to Warchant TV. It's absolutely free. Every like you get helps us find more FSU fans who love Florida State content. That's what we provide here. So, Ira, 14 official visitors, no verbal commits coming out of the weekend just yet, but judging by the wry grin on Luke Kromenhoek's face as he was leaving the facility yesterday, good news would appear to be coming for Florida State.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things they do also during the visits, I think, is there's kind of a celebration inside the stadium, inside the facilities when a kid commits. And I think we got a sense that there were a few of those celebrations going on as well. And then, like you said, if you think that Florida State came out of that weekend not feeling good about things, watch the Luke Kromenhoek video, watch the Camden Fryer video. The guys who are committed to Florida State and were doing a lot of recruiting this weekend, they were really fired up. They feel like they've got several kids committed. And again, right after that was announced, right after the weekend concluded, a bunch of the guys said that they were going to be announcing their commitment in early July. And so I think, I think we may see Florida State make a nice little run here in about a week or so.
We've got live programming here on Warchant TV every weekday at 1 o'clock. It's with the Jeff Cameron Show, tomorrow's Seminole Headlines on the channel. Why do I bring that up? That seems odd. Well, today, Ira was on the Jeff Cameron Show, and he was talking about the weekend that was. And, Ira, your sense, even though the live chat, the message boards on warchant.com, the premium recruiting board, people are getting antsy about maybe not moving the ball, advancing the ball forward since Landon Thomas flipped from Georgia to Florida State in April. People are their patience is running a little bit thin. You said on the JCS that you don't get the sense that the coaching staff is in a place like that with extra urgency at this point. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, that's my feel. I don't think that they're panicked or worried, and that's probably the challenge with a lot of this is, we can only report what's happening, and the recruits who are visiting at the time, or the recruits who are talking at the time, are who we report upon. But there's stuff going on behind the scenes, and they have a better picture of what exactly they're doing and how they're piecing things together. For example, one thing I think I've seen, a lot of people, worrying about linebacker recruiting or defensive end recruiting or whatever. And it's like, first of all, you also have to remember how many young linebackers they have on this team. They've signed several linebackers in this last class. And they're expected. I would think there's a good chance when you lose two senior linebackers that you're probably going to look in the portal for a linebacker going into next season. So again, those are the pieces that are. It's kind of hard to kind of fill in the blanks sometimes because we don't know exactly what their plans are for the long term. So I know, again, like people will look at the big picture and they'll say, like in the old days of recruiting, you could look at the roster and say, okay, well, we need to fill these holes.
Yep.
Well, now it's very different because we don't know exactly what their plan is in terms of the portal and things like that. So it's just, I would just encourage people to not get too upset or too concerned about what is happening day to day.
Well, let's actually talk about that position with the guys that are on the roster. I thought towards the end of spring, and we watch most every practice, I was there for every one that Florida State offers. I get to most of them. But I thought Omar Graham had a good finish to spring camp. And I thought DeMarco Ward was impressive, probably more consistent from start to finish than Omar Graham was. But I thought Omar's finish was bigger, was more high profile. I mean, it's not like Florida State, at least at present, is giving up on these kids already. These look like prospects, Ira, that could develop into really solid players for Florida State.
Yeah, no question. And I think the guys they signed. I mean, I think they like Dylan Brown Turner and obviously Blake Nicholson, and
Yep.
and so now and then DJ Lundy's only a junior, so he's got another year. So again, again, I would just encourage people to realize that there's a bigger picture to it. And like I said, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they went and got a linebacker out of the portal. And so now, there's the balance that, they have a scouting department, they have a general manager personnel, Derek Gray. And so what they're balancing is, okay, who are the players out there in the class of 2024? Which of those players do we have a really good chance at getting, or can we get if we make a big push? What are we going to need next year based on the guys we have and the holes we're going to have to fill? And then do we need to get guys who can make an impact early? I mean, there's just so many variables. It's very different from what it was years ago. Years ago, if you needed somebody to fill a hole, maybe you go get a junior college guy, or you're just going to have to put a freshman in. You just didn't have as many options.
Yep.
Now, man, they've just got so many options.
Well, and also it goes the other way too. You could think you're all set at a certain position, then two guys leave because they've got a freebie transfer opportunity coming to them, and there's a hole where you never thought there would be one. I think that's what the craziness of December is all about now in the college football calendar. Is you see a lot of guys from different institutions putting their name in the portal, declaring for the draft, or saying they're coming back, and you don't expect the roster to go in those directions, but that's what college coaching is now. It's if they were paranoid before, now they never sleep. And that's why they get paid the big bucks. 904 Noel already coming in. Thank you so much for the contribution. Pre-fall camp, asks 904 Noel, how much impact do you think Hakeem Williams and Destin Hill will have as freshmen? Well, Ira, do you want to start with that and the latter of the two names?
Well, what I think is interesting is I guess 904 is just assuming Vandrevius is going to have a big impact because we're not even throwing him into the mix.
Yep.
I think that of those two, I mean, I definitely think Destin Hill's got the best chance of making a contribution this season. Not just contribution, but an impact. I mean, I think Hakeem's upside is through the roof. I think he's got a ton of potential. But we saw in the spring, he was still kind of a raw receiver. Early in the spring, wasn't really in tip-top condition, had to work his way into conditioning, and then got better as the spring went on.
Yep.
But I also don't know that he's going to make a huge impact because again, it's what he brings is size, and that's great. But you have some older guys with size. You got Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Kentron Portier, Jaheim Bell at tight end. I mean, you got a lot of guys that it's not like you have to get the one freshman out there who's 6'3" or 6'4". So I think, but Destin Hill has a unique skill set with that speed. So I think to me now he's a little bit more likely to get in there. But yeah, the freshman, I think we all agree, right? Vandrevius is the most likely of the freshmen to make a big impact based on what we saw in the spring.
Yeah, and again, that's because of the size and the type of receiver that he can be. It pairs very nicely, does Vandrevius Jacobs' game, with what Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman already bring to the table. It will be interesting to see if Kentron can line up in the slot or where they line him up to get him on the field if Johnny and Keon are going to be out there at the same time. This offense is so multiple, though, Ira, that, I mean, they can really kind of do whatever they want. And a guy like a Kentron or Vandrevius or any of the freshmen that you want to name, hell, throw Goldie Lawrence in there, they're going to be going up against the fifth best defensive back that the opponent has just by nature of how loaded FSU's offense is if they want to go four wide or four pass targets from play to play. James Thompson asks, well, okay, Bud says we weren't contenders. What say you? He said we don't have enough top-end talent. Wrong. Florida State's got enough top-end talent to be a contender. Now, do you want to talk national championship or playoff? Because if it's playoff, they're absolutely contenders right here, right now. Also, I think experience counts, James. Experience counts in this equation. So Florida State is much like, I think Ira said it last week on Seminole Headlines, which is it's much like an NCAA March Madness pick in your bracket that may not have a whole lot of blue chippers coming out of high school, but they've got a point guard who's 22, and 4 out of the 5 players have played together for 3 seasons. That counts also. If you look at the experience factor, Florida State has that in droves. Ira, would you agree?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I would agree to the idea that the premise is that if you're asking like who's got the best top end talent in the country, I don't think Florida State's one of those schools. I mean, there's pockets, but across the board, no. Florida State hasn't been able to recruit like some of those other schools. What Florida State does have is a great combination of really high level talent, some elite talent, and just tons of experience. Corey actually is working on a piece right now that I think he's going to run Wednesday or Thursday on the site, probably Wednesday on the site, kind of breaking down Florida State's experience across the board and comparing it to some other teams and other successful teams. And it's pretty remarkable. He was texting Aslan and I last night. I think he said Florida State has 27 players, from what I remember, 27 players who have started at least 10 games in college football. And that's a lot of guys. You think you only have 22 starters. Florida State has 27 guys who've started at least 10 games in college football. And they've got like 20-something guys who've started like 20 or 30 games in college football. So that, again, I don't know that Florida State has player for players as much elite talent as maybe a Georgia or an Alabama or Ohio State or maybe a couple other schools. But the combination of experience plus an elite quarterback,
yeah.
I mean, I think that's where now I do think Florida State's a contender for anything.
Yeah, the thing is, I would pause a little bit more, and I wouldn't say that that's wrong on its face if we were in the situation last year where you have so many returning quarterbacks for Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama. That makes it a lot tougher. But now you're looking across the country. You could go Heisman odds, you could go whatever odds that you want, or ranking systems. But Jordan Travis is a top 3 or top 5 quarterback returning to the game of college football this year. Now, could somebody have a stud freshman or stud first-year player? Well, Alabama would be likely to have one, given the way they recruit. Ohio State right behind them. Heck, even Tennessee is raving that they might have a better quarterback this year in Milton than they did last year in Hendon Hooker. We'll see. But if you're going to lean on the experience in order to make projections about being a contender or not, Jordan Travis is loaded with it. And look at the exponential growth in his game year over year. It's fun to watch, and that's why, again, looking at the field this year, Ira, Florida State's veteran when a lot of teams aren't that are usual competitors.
Yeah, and then they have the depth to withstand, some injuries, and you're just not going to have a huge drop-off from 1A to 1B in a lot of those positions. The thing about Jordan that's interesting is I actually went back and recently I went back and watched a couple of our post-game wraps from last season. Corey and I just kind of get early in the season, middle of the season to kind of get I was just curious, like, what our mind was at during the course of the season. Did we have any sense that, maybe a 10-win season was in the offing? And after the LSU game, when we talked about how impressive Jordan Travis was in the LSU game. And I thought that was relevant. Like, I was glad to hear that because I think we focus a lot on Jordan at the end of the year. He was so good against Oklahoma, threw for 400 yards. He was so dynamic against Florida when the pass rush was getting after him. He was breaking all those plays and making plays with his legs. And there were some games in the middle of the season where he didn't pass for a lot because they ran the ball so well, like the Miami game. But it was interesting to kind of go back and see us after the LSU game saying, wow, this was cool because it affirmed what we had seen in camp.
Yep.
So now think about that. Like, we're going back now to preseason camp. We were very high on Jordan, the way he played. There were days where we looked at each other like, well, this is different.
Yep.
And then puts it together from the early in the season against LSU through the entire season, obviously at the end of the season. Then this spring, Mike Norvell kept saying it all spring, and he's saying it in interviews recently. I just saw another interview with him recently where he said Jordan Travis was the most improved player on the team in the spring. Man, to your point, there aren't a lot of teams that are going to have that, even teams that have more top-end talent.
Yeah, and again, it's not like Florida State hasn't filled in some of those gaps, and that's what the portal's been to Florida State. It was a lifeline to keep the program afloat under Mike Norvell, and now it's this thing that allows for luxury pieces to be added, and we'll see how they all fit together. That's the fun of fall camp.
Could
Perry
you?
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you real quick to go back to Eric Angel's question about kickoff because I was just thinking about that also. Who do you think they're going to bring to kickoff, man? Like, because they're bringing 3 players now, and Tom and I and the whole crew, Jeff, Aslan, I think Corey, maybe Matt. We'll have a big crew up there at ACC kickoff in mid to late July. Jordan has to go.
Yep.
Jordan, Trey, and Verse.
So I think Jordan and Jared Verse both have to go for sure. The question beyond that, actually, we talked about this today on the JCS. This is going to be a question I ask you. If you were Florida State, who would you take? And Jeff's answer, I agree with. If you're going to play it safe, you go with somebody who is a veteran beyond a veteran, because nobody can get mad, because these are all good candidates. I mean, Robert Scott, if he was healthy, I think would be a great candidate too. Maybe even, he's coming back off of spring. I mean, he should be healthy for fall camp. But what an affable guy to take to Charlotte, to go
Right.
through the questions with the media. I think Fabian Lovett's the answer, Ira. But I
He's been before too.
yeah.
That's the thing. You've got a bunch of guys who've been multiple times, which is thanks to the COVID year and the experience of this team. So yeah, he's definitely an option. I don't know, man. Jared Verse is an All America candidate. Well, he's Verse and Jordan. You
Yep.
said are givens, right?
For me, I think they're givens. I mean, you could argue for Trey. Johnny, I'm sure, would like to be there. I mean,
I don't know. That's what I was going to say. I don't think Johnny loves the media exposure. So I don't know that he would love. Maybe he would, just the idea of being on that stage, but I don't get the sense that he's real fired up to spend an hour answering questions.
he might. When he does, he's thoughtful. When we do,
Oh yeah. He can. Yeah, he's sharp.
If it's going to be your money year, Maurice Smith. There you go, James. I know Ira and I would vote for Maurice Smith. That guy's a low key MVP this year. Who's going to replace him? We've had that talk on Warchant TV before. I think Fabian is the safe answer, but Trey would be. I mean, I totally understand that too, because if he almost had 1,000 yards. He was only the starting running back for half a season. So, he could be easily in that 12 to 1,500 yard range by the time the year's over. So I think that's fair. We're taking questions, obviously, here on Monday Smash on Warchant TV for the nearly 150 of you that are watching with us. Thanks for joining us during the summer. Be sure and check out warchant.com for all the coverage from this weekend's official visitors. We've got the latest right there on Florida State recruiting, and there may be some developments in the next week or so. So happen by the premium recruiting board. Get all that insider information on warchant.com. But we continue talking about team here because Ralph, aloha, Spartan Knoll, asked, when do you think fall camp is going to start? And, I mean, Ira, we can kind of throw an educated dart at the board. Saturday, August 5th, I feel like is a pretty good guess, because typically we have a luncheon with the coaching staff on a Friday. We've done that a lot in the past. So I feel like that by that time that weekend occurs, there's going to be some sort of event surrounding fall camp. It may even be that's when they report. What do you think?
Yeah, it's possible. It might be the week before that, though.
Okay.
I'm just thinking because, and we'll know soon, and we can actually they're making Jordan Travis and Trey Benson available. I think it's Trey, right? Jordan and Trey are available on Wednesday to the media to talk about summer workouts. So maybe when we're over there, we'll get a chance to see if we can get an idea. But it might be the week before. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the very end of July, just because then you could spread things out. I feel like if it was, I don't know, it feels like it may be a little compacted if you didn't start till August 7th. If they report the 5th, but they don't actually start practicing till the following week. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was a week before, but somewhere in there. And then, it's basically a month, and it's just, man, this is going to be a preseason. The 2017 preseason was cool because you had the Alabama game. There was a lot of hype about it, but we couldn't actually cover practice.
Yep.
Like, we would stand outside and talk to Jimbo we could watch the first 15 minutes of stretching and some walkthrough, and then we would talk to Jimbo afterwards. But this preseason, we'll have a full month of looking at these transfers, really getting a feel for, all these guys, Keon Coleman, all these guys that have come in, plus the guys that have developed that have already been, or guys that missed the spring due to injuries. There was a bunch of guys that didn't play in the spring due to injuries. So this preseason is going to be as much fun to cover as any I can remember.
Yeah, typically, Ira, I meander over to the trenches, and I'm sure that's what I'll do for many of the days. But receiver is just absolutely loaded. When you talk about 7-on-7s, individual 1-on-1s, and then, when they rotate in and out with the quarterbacks for full team 11-on-11, it's just who the two at the top are going to be. Keon Coleman, by definition, is not brought in here to be, on the second or third line here too deep. Right. Johnny Wilson, of course, is going to be there in ink. But from there, that's going to be a furious competition for every rep. Destin Hill is a dark horse, and everybody's favorite question on the message boards the last 2 or 3 years. But Vandravius Jacobs continuing on from what he did in spring. Kentron, of course, is going to be in that mix. What about a guy like a Deuce Spann or a Ja'Kai Douglas? That is, if you're talking about positions where I don't know what the heck's going to happen, when you talk 3 receiver, 4 receiver, as you go 1 through 4, who knows?
if Darian Williamson's healthy,
Yep.
I mean, it's just a bunch of dudes. I think it was on the Smash one I did with Aslan. We were talking about Darian Williamson because I saw him out at the camp this summer. I saw him over at FSU in the summer, and it's like, man, you forget that guy physically looks like an NFL wide receiver, and we saw it in glimpses when he was healthy of what he could be. So yeah, man, he throws his hat in the ring too, and it's yeah. And then we don't know, again, like a guy like Hakeem Williams and some of those other young guys who are going to be pushing for chances as well.
Yeah, Darion served as an official host this weekend too for I forget which wide receiver prospect. It may have been was it the Reagan's kid?
Could have been.
Could have been, but I was glad to hear that. Just saying, like, all right, glad to hear that Darion is espousing everything about the program. Just because anytime like last season he has a flash against Boston College, but then he gets banged up. You wonder about a kid's mindset. But if somebody's willing to be an official host for other kids to come on campus and telling them that Florida State is the place to be, I mean, yeah, Darion's got the skill set to win a job there. While we're talking about it, Ira, what other positions beyond wide receiver, as we're going to break this thing down, is it defensive interior? Is it the secondary? Where are you going to be looking?
Secondary is a big one for sure, man, because I do think there's potential for possibly moving some guys around. I mean, we don't know. Again, like there's because of the not quite as much depth at safety as you'd like to have, especially in terms of experience depth. Look, Mike Norvell was caught off guard. We talked at the beginning of the show about constructing a roster and planning and doing all the things you want to do. Well, I think they were caught surprised a little bit by some of the guys that transferred out at the safety position. And I don't think they're worried about it, but that's a position where you could say, look, if some of these young guys aren't ready, and we'll see what they look like, but you may have to move somebody else to safety. So that's a position that'll be interesting. The nickelback competition last year between Greedy Vance and Kevin Noles was awesome, but I think you saw some other guys get work there. And then figuring out if Fentrell Cypress wins a starting job, which you would assume he would. I mean, I don't, in the spring, we didn't necessarily feel like, okay, he's clearly got to start. But if you assume he is what he was at Virginia, that he's going to be in the starting lineup, well, now, okay, do you have to move somebody else to get them in the starting lineup? So secondary, I think, is going to be the one because there's just so many variables that can mix things up.
Yeah, choose to be optimistic across the board in the secondary for a moment. You're allowed to do that. Everybody likes to be critical, and I understand why. But let's just say that Fentrell Cypress is what Pro Football Focus said he was. Right. Let's say that Greedy Vance continues down the line, and he had an excellent finish to last football season, but then he had a really good spring. So let's say that development continues. I mean, if those two guys are as they should be, and then Renardo Green is steady Eddie, and
Shaheem Jones,
and let's say Shaheem Brown's healthy, Ira. I mean, now you're talking about you're squeezing some guys out for playing time because Florida State has an embarrassment of riches. We're concerned a little bit in the media because Fentrell Cypress didn't arrive on campus and just lock a job down. And James B, I see you, man. We'll be right there. We appreciate the contribution. But what if it's not a stretch to assume that Fentrell Cypress can be a starter for you and a good one? And if Shaheem's healthy, I mean, that could change the basis by which we discuss the secondary. Instead of one with trepidation, it's just one saying, man, they're just playing good.
Yeah, that's a great point. And they did a lot of cross training in the spring. There's a lot of guys that, that they could play at corner or play at nickel or maybe even play at safety. And so now you have that versatility. So and they also play a lot of dime. Their base package is 5 DBs. They play a lot of dime. And, it's no secret. I don't think Adam Fuller's hid the fact he's not afraid to put 7 DBs out there in the right situation. So those guys are going to get plenty of opportunities. They really like the young freshman cornerbacks and defensive backs that came in, KJ Kirkland. And I know the guys that arrived later, Conrad Hussey and Edwin Joseph, but also Quindarius Jones in the spring we were all impressed by. So, they'll probably, my guess is they'll kind of wean those guys in. They're not going to put a lot of those guys out there early in the season, but I think you're going to see a lot of those young guys even get some at-bats in that secondary.
James B from the top rope, he says, smash it up, pillars in the house. Yeah, I'm watching the chat there, James B. Ira, they're dividing and conquering our time at Warchant when we get down to Orlando. Apparently, Kurt's house is going to be open to everybody. We're going to do live shows from there. Ray Pereira is all for it, and we see a lot of you in the chat. But thank you to James B.
Thanks,
Really,
James B.
we appreciate it. We can't wait to see you at the events as the season starts to unfold. Let me do a quick promo for what we got coming up on Warchant TV this week. And before I get into it deep, you can leave that graphic up there, Ben. Is anybody else having a house where pets are shedding like crazy? If you see a handkerchief appearing on the screen, take a drink of whatever drink you have in your hand. I'm probably going to wipe my nose the next half an hour, probably 15 more times. If you got pets that are shedding all over the place, let us know in the chat. But at any rate, tomorrow, live, 1 o'clock, it's Seminole Headlines. Corey will be in Georgia. Jeff and Ira will hold it down in the studios at 93.3, 1 p.m. on Warchant TV. The JCS runs all week. We're going to take a little bit of a break for July 4th starting next week, but that's not now. Wednesday through Friday, we're set from 1 to 3. A live recruiting chat on Wednesday night. You are going to want to be there on Warchant TV. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell. It alerts you every time we go live. So if you get distracted doing something, yard work, you're out in the pool, your phone will go off. It'll tell you the recruiting chat is live at Wednesday, 6 p.m. with Michael Langston talking about what should be an official visit weekend that bears fruit. I would say, Ira, probably in the next week or week and a half. But that's what's coming up here on Warchant TV all week. So, Ira, what do you think? Over, under July 5th, Florida State gets a couple of yeses.
Over. I think it'll be, my guess is it'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or so.
Yep.
Yes, I think it'll be a nice little run. And, again, I get it, especially because of what Florida did last week. And and Jeff and I talked about it last week in the Smash. I would just encourage people to remember this is not a sprint. It's a marathon in recruiting. And what it looks like right now might not be exactly what it looks like in the fall. And look, man, Florida needs momentum. They need some good juice around their program because of Billy Napier's first season, because they're not expected to be very good this year. So they made a big push. They got a lot of early commitments. We'll see if they can hold on to them in the fall. And then in the meantime, I think Florida State's going to do just fine.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, to me, this is something I said last week, is everybody has kind of been losing their collective mind a little bit about other schools, seeing all the edits go out for all these other schools. If we get to fall camp and the commencement of fall camp and Florida State has not made major strides, which is to say, handful of commitments are thereabout and big names saying yes to Florida State, okay, I'll be with you. But just because times are slow doesn't mean you have to stare at the recruiting rankings at On3 and say we're at 13, we're at 14, and you flip out. So for me, I'm playing the long game here, Ira.
And think about these guys. I mean, I could not be more impressed by Luke Kromenhoek, what he did at the Elite 11. I mean, think about that. I don't think we talked about it much. You and Jeff may have talked about it on your show some, but like, he goes out to the Elite 11, and Luke was not one of the biggest names necessarily, certainly 6 months ago. He's kind of come onto the stage. A lot of those guys have been top recruits in the country since they were freshmen in high school. They were just big time, highly acclaimed quarterbacks because they started early in their high school careers. Luke didn't start until last year. And so he goes out there, kind of talked a big game, said he wanted to go out there to win it, had a really nice first day. His second day was not good. He did not perform well on the second day. He talked yesterday after his visit. He said that, they had him do some things he'd never done before. He'd never done a 7-step drop before in his life. And so he just kind of got out of his comfort zone. And then he just started pressing and did not have a good day. Imagine the pressure on you. Think about yourself, Tom. Like, I was thinking about this while he was out there. You're 17 years old. Maybe he's 17, 18 years old. You're at an event with the best quarterbacks in the country. You've got college quarterbacks out there, college coaches, scouts watching, everybody paying attention. You talked yourself up before you went out there. You expressed confidence before you went out there. And now your second day is a dud. You just did not perform well at all. And you know that people are now taking shots at you. To come back that next day and have maybe the best day, one of the top 2 or 3 days of anybody out there that last day, man, that's awesome. I mean, that's really impressive. I mean, it just tells you everything you need to know about that kid, because he's out in California. He's not at home. I mean, it's just so many things that could make you get in your head. I mean, think about the sports or the activities we're involved with. If you're playing golf, and you have a few bad holes, how hard it is to turn that around. And I think this kid's pretty special. And Cam Davis, the running back, is pretty special. I mean, they've got a lot of the kids you already have committed. it's already, I think, really an outstanding class.
Yeah, you've got cornerstones, and you could see how the torch will be passed from this offense that Florida State has this year. And even if it purges a ton of players, which it figures to do, you could see how you get to the 24s and the 25s because there's Hakeem Williams is waiting in the wings. So is Dre Jacobs, Goldie Lawrence, Destin Hill. Whether it's AJ Duffy or Brock Glenn that wins the job in the interim until Croman Hawk gets up to speed. I mean, it's just you could see the line of succession. Running back the same way, offensive line the same way. The best left tackle prospect that Florida State has had since I've been around. I mean, there you go. There's another one. Everybody enjoys.
All right, everybody a drink.
Is Lucas Simmons. I can't wait. Ira, he had a nice finish to spring. I am interested to see once they check in for camp, we get out there, the kind of work that Lucas Simmons put in upper body wise in the offseason. Right. He doesn't have to get much larger to be a factor, I think. And I'm not saying that necessarily start, but to be in that tackle rotation, it's just you can see how the offense gets from year to year. The question is, how are we going to see that defense up front, linebacker? I think secondary, they've got a good transition going. But yeah, the conversation's changed at Florida State, and that's part of it.
And even the offensive line, again, we could kind of go down this for a long time. But when you think about the guys you brought in as transfers, they're not all seniors. Keandre Jones, Jeremiah Byers. Both have another year of eligibility after this season. We'll see whether or not they use it, but they still have eligibility. Then you think about the guys you've been bringing in, and again, some of the guys you have been in the program for 4 years still have your eligibility remaining. Maurice Smith, Robert Scott, some of those guys. But then you bring in 2 years ago, you brought in Julian Armella and Jalen Early and, Kaniah Charlton and some really impressive young players. Those guys are going to be coming in as well. So it's just, man, that's the thing. Like, I think there's a temptation for a lot of people to feel like this is like Florida State's only window, that they have to cash in this year. And yeah, this is his last year. And that puts some pressure on it. That puts some a time element to it. But it's not like Florida State isn't built to have success again next year. So I think this is going to be the start of a run. I think what we saw last year was the start of a really nice run. Now, part of it's going to do these quarterbacks develop the way, we think they'll develop.
Yeah, I think offensively speaking, this is going to be an offensive-led program. The game is anyway. That's the way the sport is played now, college football. But, you could see for the next 4 or 5 seasons what they're thinking and who the solutions are. You don't have to say, well, I need to dip into the portal to help out of this position. You really don't have to do that much anymore, which is a far cry from where it was. And just to speak to Luke, the player, Ira, you were out there yesterday for the interviews. But you mentioned today when you had your interview about his relative size to Jonathan Daniels, who is a large offensive line prospect out of Pensacola that it seems like Florida State's going to get good news from in the days to come. But that if he's anywhere in the realm of a Jonathan Daniels, then Luke Croman Hawk is not a small kid, and just maybe his presence, in person. Sometimes it doesn't bleed through in the camera. But what did you take away from just being around Luke and the way he carries himself?
I was thinking about it a little bit while we were interviewing him because again, like I'm not out there for all the recruiting things. But I did happen to be out there at that camp when they first offered him 2 years ago. And I remember watching them, like the way Kenny Dillingham and Mike Norvell were glued to him at this camp. And at the time, I think he was a freshman in high school. And, I just remember he was just a skinny little kid. And it's cool to now see him as kind of a grown man. Now he's going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger. He's going to fill out even more. But he is carrying himself, just – again, like some of the conversations he's having with these other players, the way he talked about his mother putting on her recruiting hat, his mother and father were tweeting after the visit, or at least his father was tweeting after the visit. They're I was also thinking back to, and I've said this before, but the class that came in that Jameis Winston was in, Mario Edwards, all those guys that were in that class. Darby, the parents kind of helped build that class. It can't be just the coaches and just the players. A lot of times it's the families, and Jameis Winston's dad, Aunt, and Mario Edwards Sr. and some of the other parents really kind of helped get that class together. I thought it was cool to hear Luke talk about his parents trying to kind of help recruit the other parents and get them all on board. I think Cam Davis's mother is very active on social media. A couple of the other players' mothers are as well. So that that part of it, I think when you have a special class, and I think this 2024 class has a chance to be a pretty special class. Again, it's your first class building off of success. This isn't guys just building off of Mike Norvell selling the climb. This class is built off of the part of that, but then also part of the success of last year. And I think it's got a chance. I think it's going to be a really good class.
And we'll see as the season develops, if Florida State does what we all believe that they're going to do in terms of the win-loss column, it could get very interesting in a good way in December. Florida State has been chasing, it feels like, Ira, in the final week before the early signing day since it existed, really, since the early signing day became a thing. What about now, Florida State potentially having momentum? That's what we get to look forward to this season, assuming that the 12-game slate goes as most, including Vegas, think it will. We'll get to Vegas in just a moment, too. But Eric Angel, thank you so much for your contribution, one of the pillars of the program. He sends his support. Eric says he looks forward to us smashing LSU, so we appreciate the contribution there, Eric. I believe he and James B are at CP right now, so good for you at a sponsor of Warchant TV, the Corner Pocket Bar.
Everybody's got a drink.
Oh, he switched up. All right, he went a little lighter.
Yeah. So we had people over a couple weeks ago, and so had a variety of beer, and a lot of it got left over. So I'm working my way through it. So it's kind of a catch-all in the fridge right now. We got a lot of different makes and models working in the kitchen.
So I'm not saying to tilt the camera and show what's going on outside of the frame, Ira, but do you bring in a mini cooler? Like, how does this work during the show?
No. I just bring in 2. Usually, sometimes I've brought in 3 before if I knew it was going to be a lot to talk about, but I just brought in a couple. I'm fine this time.
The old school red stripe days for the Smash were funny to me because it would be me or Jeff or whoever making a point, you'd hear and you'd hear the pop. Yeah. Like, oh, yep. All right, Ira's getting to another one. Well, I teased Vegas, and Ray Pereira, one of the pillars on Warchant TV, asked this question, I think a couple of times different ways, but he said he saw that LSU, Ira, was a 3-point favorite over Florida State. I have not seen that. I will check some of the sports books, but if you can find LSU -3, that is to say FSU +3, tell me where to run to the pay window. I'm about to be in New York where that's legal. I'll place a wager this weekend. FSU +3? I mean, Ira, that's got to be a misprint of some kind. I wouldn't think they're a 3-point dog in Orlando.
Though, yeah, the last I've seen is 1. Yeah. Now, maybe in power ratings or something like that, because, again, the fact that it is in Orlando, maybe there's a power rating that shows in a neutral field that they would be 3 points favored. But no, what I've seen, and I haven't looked lately, but everything I've seen so far is 1 point, and I'm with you, man. Like, I would definitely take the 3 points if you could get them.
Yeah, agreed. We'll see how it shakes out. But Ray, trust me when I say, buddy, that when I get up to a state where I can legally place a wager this week, I will take a look at that. Keith from Spring Hill chimes in on the Monday Smash as we're climbing near 200 people watching us here on Warchant TV. Feel free to throw a like underneath the video if you're enjoying what you're watching. Go Noles, he says. Is there a chance Fentrell Cypress didn't stand out in spring because it's pretty much just one-on-one drills against big physical wideouts? Could he shine more against the speedy receivers? Ira, do you want to take that, or you want me to take it?
You can. Go ahead. I mean, I'll offer what I would say.
I'd say no. I mean, he's going to be playing outside, ideally, Keith. So he's going to be facing big wide receivers by definition, some of the larger targets that the opposition has. I would just frame it this way. When I first saw Greedy Vance come to Florida State and they did the switch with Brownlee for Vance, I was not impressed. I thought he was slowish. I thought all he did was use his hands to grab and tug at receivers, which is going to get automatically flagged. I didn't know how he was going to fit. But once he learned the system, by the back half of last year, he was one of FSU's best defensive backs, and he was easily one of the best defensive backs this spring. So I think a learning curve, a grace period, if you will, should be afforded Fentrell. I don't think it had anything to do with receiver size, though. What do you think, Ira?
No, I agree with that. And I also I would encourage people to not worry about Fentrell Cypress. I mean, I was talking to somebody who would know pretty recently, and they said he's a dude. They're not concerned about what he is. I think it could go one of 2 ways. When you come in, when you transfer in from another program where you've had a lot of accolades. I mean, he was second team All ACC by the media and coaches. He was first team All ACC by Pro Football Focus, based strictly on his grades. Mm-hmm. He comes into a new program, Florida State. He could have come in with the mindset of, I've got to prove myself, and I've got to, I'm the new guy, and I've got to make every play, and I've got to do, I've got to, kind of let everybody know who I am. It's kind of what Jared Verse was when Jared Verse came in from Albany. I don't think that that's what Fentrell Cypress's mindset was. I think he just took practice as, hey, we're out here at practice. I'm going to cover these guys. I'm going to work on my skills. I mean, it's something we've talked a lot about. Tom, you and I have talked about a lot that I think is often overlooked. Is at practice, we don't always know what they're working on,
Yep.
and so we can sit there and chart. This guy beats so and so in one-on-one, or this guy beats so and so on this pass rush drill, but we don't know exactly what they're working on. And so I wouldn't put too much into, okay, he gave up a lot of passes in one-on-one. First of all, receivers have a huge advantage anyway in one-on-ones. And also, like I said, I never got the impression, it wasn't like he was out there getting frustrated. Like, oh, I just can't cover these guys. He was just practicing. So, and again, from talking to people around the program, they think he's every bit as good as they thought he was going to be. So I just don't think, I wouldn't worry that he didn't make a ton of big plays in the spring.
We talked about this with Jordan Travis a couple of years ago in spring, which was they know he can run. So, if he doesn't look great, this was spring of 22. If he doesn't look great day to day, yeah, it's probably because he's refining his craft to learn what else he can do so that the playbook can expand, and that's not just, it's easiest to point to quarterback and see that, as an example, but every position you have little keys that you're working on or things that if all you did was what you're good at, then really you wouldn't learn much about yourself or develop a player.
Well, and then remember in the spring, I asked JP because, there were times at practice where like Patrick Payton would just be working on bull rushing all the time. Mm-hmm. And these power, and I was just like, he could beat that guy, if he used his speed. And, JP is like, yeah, a lot of times we want them to work on what they're not comfortable with, what they're not good at. Now, when they get into a game, they know that what they are good at, and it's trying to improve those other things. So again, I would encourage people not to get to where it's our job. We're out there. We feel like we've got to provide you guys with content, and we're going to tell you that this receiver beat this DB or this defensive end beat this offensive tackle. But a lot of times, there's so much more that goes into it. I wouldn't read too much into that.
Yeah, and everybody seems to trade wins and losses only once in a while, and you'll hear the different tone in our voice. Like when I say, I don't care what technique they were working on, Vandrevius Jacobs smoked some guys in one-on-ones. Like that's different. But, everybody's going to take their turns and win and lose individual reps. But when you see somebody's name over and over and you hear the way that we describe it, that's when you could start to put something in the bank. We'll look forward to seeing what Fentrell does. Again, whether or not it starts that final week of July or not, we're about 5 weeks away, which is unbelievable. This summer's moving very fast. Trey asks, who has the bigger impact this season, Braden Fisk or Fentrell? Okay.
I want to hear what you have to say about Fisk. Corey, man, loves him some Braden Fisk. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming a little bit of a running joke on headlines. And you can see in the top 40 grades, he had him much higher, 7. I think, certainly than I did. And I probably had him too low. I don't know. I just don't know. Again, the level of competition from Western Michigan, I get that he was the number one defensive tackle in the portal based on 3, going by Pro Football Focus grades. I get it. I did go back and look at some of his stats from some of their bigger games. He was productive when they played Pitt, I believe, when they played Michigan. He had productive games against Power 5 schools. So I don't want to just dismiss the fact that he didn't play that competition. But again, man, I look at Darrell Jackson, and I know he's done it for 2 years on a Power 5 defensive line. I know what Fabian Levitt's done. I know what Josh Farmer's become. I don't know that he's one of your top 3 defensive tackles. He might be. Where do you stand? And because we didn't get to see him that much in the spring.
Yeah, exactly. I think, Director Ben, if you want to wipe up the 20 through 11, we can go through this because on warchant.com, the website, you can take a look at our top 40, 11 through 15. That was released today on the channel. We have 20 through 16, but as you can see there on the screen, there was a tie at 15 with the 2 starting linebackers. The 11 through 15 video will be made public here in short order. It'll be tomorrow. But let's take a look at where Braden Fisk is at 17, Josh Farmer at 18. So, Ira, this was the crux of the video that Jeff, Corey, and I did regarding 20 through 16, that Jeff and I had Farmer a lot higher than Braden Fisk, but both Corey and Aslan had Braden Fisk highest in the staff at number 7. And that's where you have I said I put him around 20, probably 22 to 25. The reason I have Braden Fisk as low as I do is because I haven't seen him play and the injury concerns that you cited. It's just he's coming off of injury. He's trying to get up to speed. I know what Josh Farmer is, and I know what Fabian Lovett is. Darrell Jackson could be an immense impact player. Note that you don't see him on the list. I think the staff agrees at warchant.com. But consistency and the waiver, those are the two things that are going to hold him back from automatically being a dominant player. Josh Farmer's a hedge against it, Ira. Braden Fisk is still a question mark. I think it's just simple math in the offseason that you have to play it that way. But we could be 3 months from now on the Smash saying, yep, wrong. Braden Fisk should have been in the top 10 all along because that dude is as athletic and explosive as anybody we have in the defensive interior. I think if you were going to make a case, Ira, for Braden being an impact player, it would be because of that athleticism and the explosiveness, right? To win one-on-ones inside.
Right. There's no question. I mean, yeah, there's no doubt that guy can run. And we saw that. That is something we certainly saw. He can move for his size. He's a really good athlete. And I think they're going to use him. He's a guy that they could use as a bigger defensive end at times. And I think he's a guy that's going to be productive because he is going to be active and athletic. What I am curious about is, again, like I said, he had nice games against Pitt and against Michigan and some of the other Power 5 schools they played. But week in and week out,
yeah,
I'm going to guess he wasn't going up against 320-pound guards. I'm going to guess he wasn't going up against the guys you're going to see every week in and week out at an ACC school. So that's what I'm curious about. Again, does he hold up? How effective is he in those situations? Now what's nice about him and probably Farmer to a degree is, Fabian Lovett's going to get some double teams. Mm-hmm. And I think Darrell Jackson, as things go on, he may be a guy that gets some double teams. So those guys may make a lot more plays than we expect, but maybe not be the best defensive tackle just because, the other guy is occupying the double team. And you got Jared Verse out there who's going to be getting a ton of attention as well.
Here's the other wrinkle you can throw at it. On first and second down, Braden Fisk has played across the defensive line. So you could put him out there if you don't like what you have in terms of stopping the run and setting the edge. He knows how to play that position. So he could have an impact there on early downs and then slide back inside. It's just they have so many options up front that it's hard to put his name in ink as a top 3 guy in rep count. It's just, for me, it's hard to do that at this point.
But back to the original question, though. He did ask Fisk or Cypress. I kind of diverted it. I think Cypress will have the bigger impact.
Yep.
But I mean, I agree. Where I agree with you, Tom, is that we have no idea. We could be totally wrong. But based on what we know right now, I would say Cypress.
Because we know very little. Braden wore a green jersey all spring, so that makes it difficult to assess. But yeah, I agree with you. The whole point is that because of knowns, Fentrell should have the bigger impact this fall. Terry Vaughn has a question that he put out there about 22 minutes ago on the chat, and it's talking about Mike Norvell. He seemingly has morphed into the perfect coach for this program. Is there another coach in the country that you would trade him for straight up right now? Nick Saban is 70. Dabo's slipping, according to Terry. Kirby is the only one that he would do a straight-up trade for. This is dangerously close to homerism in terms of the answers. If you say no, I wouldn't trade him for anybody. But Ira, Terry raises a legitimately good question. If you're talking about high-profile Power 5 coaches and the fit that Mike Norvell has with what Florida State is at present as an athletic department and a football program, it's hard to find a better natural fit for where Florida State is and what Mike Norvell is doing. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great point. And Kirby was here. For people that don't remember, Kirby was a GA here in early 2000s for a couple of years under Mickey Andrews. And, I think everybody around the program knew then Mickey actually would let Kirby, and Kirby had already been, even though he's a GA, he'd already been defensive coordinator of Valdosta State, a Division II school. He came here to be a GA to kind of learn under Mickey and Coach Bowden before he made the jump to Division I. And it worked out well for him. But even then, like Mickey would let him coach. I think he let him coach the safeties while Mickey worked the corners or vice versa. And so there were some ties there. And there was a point in time where I wonder if Kirby would come back here because he is from Bainbridge, which is less than an hour and a half away. But obviously he landed his dream job at his alma mater. I don't know of anybody I don't know if there's anybody I would trade him with. I mean, there's some guys that, there's no question that there's, you look at the Lincoln Rileys, and there are some guys that are young also that are tremendous recruiters, tremendous minds, and would do a really good job. But I don't think there's anything you're lacking with Mike Norvell. I mean, that's the thing. Like I look at right now, the biggest question I had, and again, this is to pat myself on the back, Tom.
Go for it.
3 years ago during the pandemic, I think was when I tweeted,
Oh, there we
you
go.
know, I tweeted Mike Norvell can coach. Like just after watching him every day at practice, and you're out there also, you can tell if a guy can coach or not. Like he could coach, and I knew he could coach. You could see it. Now the results didn't bear out right away, and a lot of people would bring that tweet up in the next several months of that season. But I knew he could coach. I knew he would make a lot of good decisions in terms of like stability of a program. He talks all the time about building for the long term, not just quick fixes. I thought that was all positive. What I didn't know is, could he get elite recruits?
Yep.
And I thought Akeem Williams was a big deal. I think what he's done with Cam Davis and Luke Kromenhawk and some of these other guys that they've got committed, I think that's a big deal. Oh, look at that.
That's Ben. That's Ben all over it.
Good work, Ben. But yeah, that before the 2021 season, and they were not good. They were 5-7, so that's why he came up a lot. I didn't get ratioed, but there were plenty of comments to that tweet over the next several months. And but I mean, just that after watching preseason camp, I was like, man, this guy, you can tell he can coach. I didn't know if he could recruit at the highest levels.
Yeah.
And I know that's an issue right now. People are worried a little bit, but man, think about the guys they've gotten committed and or signed over the last year. He can recruit. So there's nothing. My point is, I don't think there's anything you don't have with him, right? There's nothing like you don't look at him and say, okay, he's a minus in these two categories. I think he may be here 20 years.
Yeah, I do want to see too. And if that's the case, then Florida State hit the jackpot at the time, and you'll never have known it in the moment, because it's just timing was right, even with the pandemic. And you thought, was he going to survive that? I don't know how many coaches would have stayed the course the way Mike Norvell did at 0-4. That's the thing. I don't know that you could trade him for anybody in the country. There might have been, what do you want me to do, guys? Presser instead of, stay the course of a message. Lincoln Riley that's an interesting one, but I like coaches who allow for defense to be a thing. So that would be the knock on Lincoln Riley. If you like Heisman's, Lincoln Riley's your guy. If you like a balanced approach with defense, remains to be seen. Now, maybe he does at USC, and if he could ever get one, then he would have won a title by now. But, I mean, again, given where Florida State is, given what they went through, he was uniquely set up to help Florida State navigate the challenges. Be interested to see how this staff develops too, Ira, over the years. If you talk about longevity as a head coach, you have to be really good at replacing guys who graduate to the next level, who take on a promotion. And Mike Norvell has already proven in his brief head coaching career that people want to come back to work for him, and people want to work for him because he's going to advance them. Just like player development, there's coaching development that happens under Mike Norvell.
That's a great point, man. And, the story I did the other day about the offensive line staff and Alex Atkins, and Alex Atkins could have left by now if he wanted to. He's not leaving. He hasn't left yet because he wants to keep learning under Mike Norvell. He likes working with Mike Norvell. Gabe Fertitta, the senior analyst in that group, also wants to work for Mike Norvell, wants to work on the staff, and that means a lot. I mean, there's a satisfaction, but also a personal development when you work for a head coach who wants to see you succeed. Again, this isn't one of those staffs, not to throw Jimbo under the bus, but like Jimbo's assistants never often really love working for Jimbo Fisher. And you put up with it if you have success. And it means you're going to get a chance to recruit great players and win championships. But if you don't have that, now what do you have? And I think when you look at, again, what Mike Norvell has right now, if he can have sustained success along with that, the ability to work and feel like you have an ownership in the team and feel like you have a voice, those things matter. And I think he'll be able to either not just keep a staff together for a while, but also, like you said, be able to replace guys. Guys will want to come work for the staff.
Yeah, like a lot of deadbeat dads in the 50s and 60s, the assistant coaches at Florida State under Jimbo in the beginning, first chance they got in the car and they just took off. They didn't tell them. They didn't do anything, Ira. When they pulled out of the driveway, they were gone, and that speaks volumes because, like to your point, Alex Atkins, he's waiting for the right job because he's got a great one. And, of course, Florida State is rewarding his successes financially the athletic department's in a much more healthy place to,
Right.
take assistant salaries to the levels that the competition is doing so as well.
Is LSU up 6-2? Is that true?
Is that, well, I'll take Eric Angel's word for it. If he's at Corner Pocket Bar and Grill, those televisions are bright and shiny and everywhere. So
I'm
uh,
sure that's going to be a high scoring affair.
it is indeed 6-2. That is a fact. So that
Wow.
game is only in the top of the second right now. So it's going to be a long night in Omaha, but hopefully a longer night for Florida than it is LSU in terms of that usually implies a bad one. In the last couple of minutes here on Monday Smash, remember, everybody, hit the like button underneath the video and find us at warchant.com for all the great content. We're taking a couple more questions. I see one in the hopper from Briley. This is a loaded question. Briley asks smart questions that are like more nuanced. Who's more likely to start, asks Briley. Fentrell Cypress? Okay, once again, Ira, we're coming back to him. Or Robert Scott? What do you think? I know the answer is yes, but I mean, who is more likely? Who's more likely?
Just because, I mean, everything we know, Fentrell Cypress is completely healthy.
Yep.
Then I would say him.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Robert Scott's completely healthy, I think he'll start.
Yep.
He didn't participate in the spring. We'll have to see how he is when they get to camp and whether or not he's 100% for game one or if it's later in the year. We'll have to see. But I think if they're both healthy, then I'd give the edge to Robert Scott. But based on the fact that Robert didn't practice in the spring, I would probably give a slight edge to Cypress, right?
An excellent way to answer that question. Yes, I agree. I mean, if they're both healthy, they're both starting in some capacity. But yeah, I think because Robert's been out, I think Ira, just judging by seeing him walk around campus at that time in the spring, he needed to get back in the weight room to put some weight back on. We'll see how he looks in fall camp. But there is a challenger now. There are several challengers at left tackle. There are challengers in the tackle room. And that just hasn't been the case. If you were a decent tackle at Florida State for the last, how long do we want to say? 6 years, 7 years? You were going to start if you were because you're the only one. You look around the room and it's like there's one of you. And it could be that Robert Scott was that guy at the beginning of his career. But now, I mean, you mentioned Jalen Early, who's somebody we don't talk about as much as Julian Armella. But there's Bless Harris. Byers could potentially play tackle.
Yeah.
Armella, Early, Lucas Simmons down the line, and we'll see how long it takes for him to have that switch flip for him. There's a lot of competition in that room for the first time in eons.
Darius Washington started games at tackle last year.
Yep.
And I think Roddick has played tackle before if you needed somebody. So yeah, they've a ton of options. And that's one nice thing about it. If you do have a guy that's banged up, if you think back over these last couple of years, how many games did Robert Scott's and Maurice Smith's and Darius Washington's and Dylan Gibbons's and all these guys had to play when they were not healthy because they didn't, even the line had gotten better, they still didn't have any depth. Devontae Love Taylor a couple of years ago, guys that would play through those injuries. Now you may not need to. So maybe it's a situation where you've got a guy, whether it's a Robert Scott or somebody else who isn't 100% in camp, but they would be in game 2 or game 3 or game 4. Maybe you don't need to play them as much. Now that first month is huge. You got to win those games, but at least you've got other options. You don't have to feel like an unhealthy guy is your best option.
Our last question before we sign off goes to Matthew Sims, who says, how are we feeling about the safety position? So, Ira, I'll do it this way. 5 is very confident. 1 is not confident at all. How would you rate your feeling about the safety position, 1 through 5?
I'd say a 4. Taking everything into consideration, the starters, the backups. I'm really, I'm telling you, this season's going to tell me a lot about Mike Norvell and Adam Fuller and their I don't say confidence or loyalty or stick-to-itiveness into veteran players. Because again, Akeem Dent now will be, he has started, we talked about guys who've started a lot of games. Akeem Dent has started a ton of college football games. Yep. He did move back and forth between safety and corner early in his career, but this would be basically third year as a starting safety. And they will give you all the reasons why he hasn't been a star yet. And they still believe he could be a really high-level safety this season. I want to see if that's validated. It feels like when they've done that with guys so far that it's been validated. When they stuck with Jordan Travis, everybody wanted them to go in the portal and get a quarterback last year. and they didn't. They stuck with Jordan Travis, and he panned out. There have been other guys as well. So that's going to be really when I think Shaheem's going to be. I think Shaheem's a talent. I think he may have a play or two this year. You get frustrated, but I think he's going to make a lot of big plays. But Akeem Dent to me is the guy like they think he can be a high level college safety, starting safety, and not have the ups and downs he's had the last 2 years. That's one I really want to see because I think it'll tell us about them and whether or not they're right or if it's just hope or if they know exactly why they're going to stick with somebody.
Yeah, do they know what they're looking at in terms of the
Right?
the breakout ability?
Or are you just making excuses for somebody, or because again, I think they think he's going to come through in a big way this year.
If Shaheem Brown is healthy for all 12 games, Matthew, I'll go a 4 as well. But let's see if the young man can be fully 100% explosive throughout. I just don't know about the depth there, so that would be why I ding it down to probably a 3, unless Shaheem is good to go, and you can tell me right now that he's out there for all 12 games. But Ira, the one thing I'll say is that given how good Florida State is up front now defensively, these members of the secondary are about to look a lot better because there'll be a lot of balls thrown right into their chest. And that's what Adam Fuller was talking about in the spring. Yeah. If as a quarterback, you're under duress constantly, you're going to make a mental mistake where it looks like you're just giving the ball to the other team. Haven't seen that a ton for Florida State in the secondary. Didn't see it a ton last year, but it could change just like that because of all the impact that Florida State can have up front with that group of 4.
Yeah. And last thing I wanted to say, just kind of going back to that Robert Scott question, when we did the top 40, we're making the assumption these guys are all available and healthy. And the reason I do want to point that out is because, again, there are some questions about some guys, and Darrell Jackson doesn't have his waiver yet. As you said, he hasn't been in the top 30 yet. So we're not giving away a spoiler here. He's going to be in that top 10, but he hasn't gotten the waiver yet. So we're going under the assumption he is going to have it. And again, Robert Scott, there's a couple other guys that were banged up in the spring that we're going under the assumption that they're going to be able to play.
It is the new Destin Hill question on the boards and the warchant.com or Warchant TV chat, which is, where's that waiver? What's the deal with the waiver? NCAA keeps their own counsel, folks. They it's a sundial, not a watch on their wrist. That's the kind of time that they keep. So the moment that comes down, we will share the news with you. But all of those developments in between now and the game against LSU, Jeffrey Walsh is feeling it. September 3rd can't get here fast enough. We're under 70 days to kick off against LSU, which means we're roughly about 40 days, give or take, from fall camp beginning. We'll have you covered on everything from recruiting and team between now and kickoff against LSU. We can't wait to live out the next 5 weeks, Ira, because then we could report as to what happens blow by blow in individual reps. We're one of the lucky few media crews in the country to be able to witness practice. So that's what's around the corner. Anything that you want to tease coming up on the site, outside of Seminole headlines on the channel tomorrow at 1 o'clock live here on Warchant TV for this week's content, sir?
Yeah, we do have more recruiting coverage coming. Michael and Matt have some stuff that's still going to be rolled out over the next couple of days. Tomorrow morning, we're getting to interview. Baseball is not the biggest topic, but Mike Capozzi, FSU's new pitching coach, just got formally announced today. He's actually going to meet with the media tomorrow morning, so we'll have coverage of that. And as I said, we'll actually get a few football players to talk to Jordan Travis, I think Trey Benson on Wednesday. And then we're finishing up this, not finishing up, I guess. Well, sort of finishing up this top 40. We're into the top 10 now. So that's going to be coming over the next week or so.
It's getting close, everybody. You can feel it. This is the last Monday Smash until after the holiday. So happy July 4th, everybody out there. Hope you're safe as you travel with your families to the beach near you or to the pool, wherever you're going. Enjoy your July 4th and that barbecue. For Ira, my name is Tom. We want to thank Director Ben behind the scenes, James B. and Eric for their contributions, as well as early on 904 Noel. Thank you to everybody who participated in the chat. Throw us a like on the way out. This has been the Monday Smash on Warchant TV. We will talk to you here on the channel next time.
Thanks, guys.